An entire civilization once vanished beneath the ground. This is the story of Derinkuyu, a massive underground city in Turkey, built to survive an ancient catastrophe. By the end, you will understand the incredible engineering and desperate cooperation that allowed thousands to live in darkness for generations. We will uncover why they sealed themselves away with rolling stone doors and how a network of secret tunnels connects to other lost cities. What does it take for a community to choose a life buried in stone? The ground beneath their feet held a memory of fire. Long before the first tunnels were carved, the region we know as Cappadocia was a place of unimaginable geological violence. Towering volcanoes, now dormant, once painted the sky with ash and rained down rivers of molten rock. Over countless centuries, this volcanic fury cooled and compressed into a soft, pale stone called tuff. Wind and water then sculpted this malleable canvas into the surreal landscape we see today, with its famous fairy chimneys and sweeping, otherworldly valleys. But this was more than a scenic wonder. This soft stone was the key to everything. It could be carved with simple bronze or even stone tools, yet when exposed to air, it hardened, creating stable walls and ceilings. The environment presented a stark paradox. The same volcanic forces that made the surface world unpredictable and dangerous also provided the perfect material to retreat from it. Archaeologists point out that you don't build a city underground in solid granite. The decision to go down was made possible by this unique geological gift. So the story of Derinkuyu begins not with a blueprint, but with a necessity shaped by the land itself. The community looked at the soft rock walls of their valleys and saw not just a home, but a hiding place. They understood that their greatest threat and their ultimate sanctuary were carved from the very same stone. It was a simple home renovation in 1963 that changed everything. A local man in the town of Derinkuyu was working in his cellar, perhaps clearing out old storage or trying to create a little more space. When he knocked through a section of the back wall, instead of finding more earth, his tools met empty air. A cool, damp draft whispered out from a blackness that seemed to have no end. This was no small hole or animal burrow. It was a carefully carved doorway, sealed shut and forgotten, leading into a void that had been silent for centuries. Word of the find spread quickly, drawing the attention of archaeologists. What began as a curious gap in a basement wall soon became a monumental excavation. Teams began to clear the passage, their lights revealing not just a single room but an entire level, then a staircase leading down to another and another. Each new layer uncovered more of the complex, a vast, inverted labyrinth that seemed to defy logic. The sheer scale of what lay beneath that ordinary house was staggering. It was a powerful reminder that the past is not always distant. Sometimes it is resting directly under the floorboards of the present, waiting for one accidental tap on the right wall to wake it. This single moment connected a modern homeowner with the ancient community that had sealed that doorway, perhaps for the final time. It makes you wonder how many other entrances are still concealed, hidden behind plaster or buried under village squares, holding stories we have yet to learn. The discovery of that hidden doorway revealed far more than a few empty chambers. This was a fully realized city, meticulously carved in reverse. To call Derinkuyu a cave system is to call a cathedral a pile of stones. It was a masterclass in vertical urban planning, where every level served a distinct purpose, transforming depth into a blueprint for survival. The upper floors closest to the surface were the bustling heart of daily life. Here, archaeologists have identified spacious family dwellings, complete with carved benches, shelves, and sleeping platforms, ventilation shafts, some stretching over 100 feet to the surface, brought down fresh air and faint whispers of daylight. Nearby were communal kitchens, their walls still darkened by ancient smoke, and large common rooms that likely served as gathering spaces, schools, or places of worship. This was a neighborhood, a place for community to persist even in the depths. Deeper down, the city's infrastructure came into focus. Separate levels were dedicated to critical resources. Vast storage chambers held enormous clay jars for grain, oil, and water, enough to sustain a population for months. Remarkably, they even carved out dedicated wineries and olive presses, proving that life underground was not just about bare survival, but about preserving culture and normalcy. On another level, broad, low-ceilinged halls with tethering stones and troughs served as protected stables for livestock. This was a crucial design insight. By bringing animals inside, the community safeguarded their precious food and wool sources, while the animals' body heat helped warm the lower chambers. The entire complex was a self-contained ecosystem. Every need, from food production to social cohesion, was anticipated and architecturally provided for. This layout speaks of a society with tremendous foresight and rigid social organization. Someone had to plan the dig, assign living quarters, manage food stores, and maintain order in perpetual twilight. The stone itself tells us they were not just hiding, they were building a new world with all its complexity directly beneath the old one. But this grand design presented a single, silent, and deadly problem. The deeper you carve into the earth, the more you seal yourself away from the very air you need to breathe. A city of thousands with livestock and cooking fires would have consumed its own atmosphere in a matter of days, turning a sanctuary into a tomb. The builders of Derinkuyu faced this invisible threat with one of their most brilliant innovations, a network of over 50 vertical shafts that pierced through the rock like slender stone arteries. Some of these shafts plunge an astonishing 180 feet straight down, connecting the deepest chambers to the open sky far above. To call them air vents feels inadequate. They were precisely engineered lifelines. Each shaft was carefully positioned to exploit natural air pressure and temperature differences between the surface and the depths. Cooler, denser air from above would sink down the shafts, while warmer, stale air from the living quarters would rise and be expelled through other openings, creating a constant, passive circulation. This was not guesswork, it was applied science, a clear understanding of airflow principles that kept the entire city breathing for generations. But the ingenuity did not stop there. Many of these same shafts also functioned as protected wells. By digging down to the water table, the builders created a secure, internal water supply that could not be poisoned or blocked by anyone on the surface. A single architectural feature solved two existential crises, thirst and suffocation, with elegant, breathtaking simplicity. When we look at these smooth, deep channels carved by hand, we are not just looking at holes in the ground. We are witnessing ancient problem solving at its finest. It challenges our modern assumptions about technological progress. What other sophisticated systems, born from sheer necessity, have we yet to uncover in the silent cities of the past? Yet all of this intricate planning would have been meaningless without one final, fail-safe feature. Scattered throughout the city, at strategic choke points and the main entrances, are massive circular slabs of stone. These are not mere doors, they are engineering marvels of pure defense, each one a solid disk of rock weighing as much as a small car. Carved with a central pivot hole and set into a smooth, curved groove in the floor, they were designed to be rolled into place from the inside, sealing a corridor with a formidable, immovable barrier. The mechanism was brilliantly simple and utterly one-sided. Once that stone was shifted across the passageway, no force from the outside could lever it open. An attacker would be faced with a seamless wall of rock with no handle, no hinge, and no leverage point. It was the ultimate lockdown. This single feature tells us more about the mindset of Derinkuyu's people than perhaps any other. They were not just preparing for a temporary nuisance or a passing threat. The installation of these colossal doors points to a fear of something overwhelming, a danger so severe that the only acceptable response was complete and total isolation from the world above. It transforms the city from a hiding place into a sealed vault. Every aspect of life underground, from the air shafts to the animal pens, was built with the understanding that these doors might one day close and not reopen for a very long time. The act of rolling that stone was a profound communal decision, a collective turning of the back on the sunlit world. It meant choosing a known hardship, life in the dim, echoing chambers, over an unknown and terrifying peril outside. That groove in the floor is more than an architectural detail. It is the physical record of a line they were prepared to draw, a boundary between their community and whatever awaited them on the surface. The rolling stone doors guaranteed security, but they also created a profound new problem. A sealed city is a city cut off from rivers, springs, and rain. Without a solution, the deepest wells of human ingenuity would have run dry long before any external threat subsided. Here we find the third masterstroke of Derinkuyu's design, a hydrological network that turned solid rock into a life-giving resource. The builders did not just store water, they integrated it into the city's very foundation. Deep within the lower levels, they carved shafts that plunged straight down through the soft tuff until they struck the water table, tapping into underground aquifers that were invisible from the surface. These were not mere cisterns waiting to be filled. They were active wells providing a renewable, protected source of water that no enemy above could poison or block. It was a permanent answer to a permanent threat, but the planning went further. Archaeologists have mapped intricate networks of small, carved channels running along floors and walls. These were not for bringing water in, but for managing it with impeccable foresight. Every drop used for cooking, for animals, or for cleaning had to go somewhere. These drainage channels carefully directed wastewater away from the fresh well shafts and living quarters, funneling it into separate, deep sump pits where it could slowly filter back into the earth without contaminating the primary supply. This attention to sanitation reveals a sophisticated understanding of public health, a critical concern when thousands are living in close quarters for extended periods. The presence of dedicated spaces for wine and olive presses adds another layer to this story of provision. It tells us the community was planning for more than grim survival rations. They were preparing for a version of normal life to continue, preserving the cultural practices of fermentation and oil production that defined their diet and their rituals. To press olives underground is an act of profound hope, a declaration that the world above, with its groves and vineyards, would one day be accessible again. This logistical mastery forces us to rethink ancient crisis management. It was not a panicked reaction, but a calculated, long-term strategy. They envisioned a scenario where the surface might be hostile or barren for not just weeks, but for seasons or even years. Every carved channel and deep well represents a vote of confidence in their own endurance, and a stark acknowledgement of just how catastrophic they believed the outside world could become. But who were the hands that carved this stone sanctuary? The question of who built Derinkuyu and when is where historical certainty gives way to layered mystery. Unlike grand pyramids or temples with inscriptions, this underground city offers no cornerstone, no dedicatory plaque to its founders. Instead, archaeologists must read the story in the stone itself, and the tale it tells is one of continuous adaptation over staggering stretches of time. The most widely supported theory suggests the first tunnels were excavated by the Hittites, a formidable Bronze Age empire, as early as 2,000 years before the Common Era. For them, the soft rock would have provided refuge from rival kingdoms and the turbulent conflicts of the era. Later, the Phrygians, another powerful Anatolian civilization, are believed to have expanded the complex, deepening the wells and widening the halls. Then, centuries later, early Christian communities fleeing Roman persecution found these hidden labyrinths and made them their own, carving simple crosses into the walls and adding chapels deep underground. This succession of builders presents a fascinating debate among historians. Was Derinkuyu constructed gradually over millennia, with each generation adding a new level or a new wing as the need arose? Or was its core excavated in a single, desperate period of concentrated engineering, driven by an immediate and catastrophic threat? The evidence points compellingly toward the first idea that the city is a cultural palimpsest, like a parchment scraped clean and written over again and again. The stone of Derinkuyu bears the subtle marks of different eras, different tools, and different fears. This transforms our understanding of the place. It was not a one-time project for a single emergency. It was a legacy of retreat, a knowledge passed down through generations that the ground below was the ultimate safe haven. Each civilization that sought its shelter inherited the work of the last and added its own innovations, deepening both the physical structure and the tradition of subterranean survival. The lack of a definitive founder's name is, in its own way, the most telling clue. Derinkuyu does not belong to one people or one moment in time. It belongs to the recurring human instinct across ages to find a way to persevere when the world above becomes inhospitable. The city is less a monument to a specific king or conqueror, and more a collective masterpiece of anonymous communal foresight. The true power of Derinkuyu lies not just in its design, but in the specific nightmares it was built to withstand. To understand why a community would choose the underworld, we must look at the surface world they feared. Three prime suspects emerge from the geological and historical record, each capable of turning the sunny plains of Cappadocia into a lethal landscape. The first and most visually dramatic is the fury of the earth itself. Just 50 miles to the east looms Mount Ursiais, a colossal stratovolcano that was actively erupting during the early periods of Derinkuyu's construction. An eruption of this scale would have been an event of biblical proportions. The sky would have turned black at noon, choked with a blizzard of hot ash and pumice. This volcanic fallout, called tephra, would have smothered everything. It would have buried crops, poisoned water sources, and made the very air unbreathable, leading to widespread respiratory illness. The surface would have become a gray, lifeless desert for years, perhaps decades. In this scenario, Derinkuyu was not hiding from an enemy, but from the atmosphere itself. The deep ventilation shafts would have been sealed, and the city would have lived on its stored food and protected water, waiting for the long winter of ash to finally pass. The second threat was all too human. Cappadocia's fertile valleys and strategic trade routes made it a coveted prize for centuries. Armies from rival empires could sweep through without warning, bringing conflict, conquest, and the grim realities of ancient warfare. For farming communities, a raid meant not just the loss of possessions, but the destruction of their entire livelihood and the enslavement or loss of their people. The rolling stone doors make perfect sense against this threat. At the first sign of dust clouds on the horizon, the entire population could vanish, sealing the entrance behind them. An invading force would find empty, surface-level villages, with no people to capture and no treasure to loot. The city beneath was a form of economic and biological warfare, denying the conqueror the very resources he sought. The final suspect is a slower, more insidious catastrophe: climatic shift. Periods of prolonged drought or sudden cooling could devastate an agricultural society. A succession of failed harvests would lead to famine, social collapse, and desperate migrations of starving people. In such times, a secure, stocked underground city would be a fortress of last resort, protecting not just from the weather, but from the desperation of others. It was a bank for survival, where the wealth was measured in jars of grain and barrels of water. What connects these three scenarios is their recurring nature. The people of this region did not fear a single, unique apocalypse. They lived with the constant memory and likelihood of disaster, whether from the trembling earth, the dust of approaching armies, or the failing rains. Derinkuyu, therefore, was not an act of paranoia, but one of profound rationality. It was the ultimate insurance policy, carved in stone, against a world that had repeatedly shown them how fragile life on the surface could be. Their engineering genius was matched only by their clear-eyed understanding of the dangers that shaped their existence. The scale of Derinkuyu alone is difficult to comprehend, but the real revelation came when archaeologists began to look beyond its walls. They discovered that this city was not an isolated fortress. It was a single node in a vast hidden web. Scattered across Cappadocia are the remains of dozens of other underground complexes, with at least 36 identified so far, each with its own network of rooms, ventilation shafts, and rolling stone doors. The most famous of these is Cappadocia, located just a few miles from Derinkuyu. While smaller in depth, it sprawls laterally across multiple levels and shares the same sophisticated design principles. For decades, these cities were studied as separate marvels, but then a tantalizing clue emerged from the local folklore and the physical landscape itself. Between Derinkuyu and Cappadocia, surveyors identified the remnants of a wide, carefully carved tunnel, large enough for 3 people to walk abreast. This was not a ventilation shaft or a private cellar. It was a subterranean highway. While the full length of this connection may never be fully excavated, its existence changes the entire story. Derinkuyu was not just a sealed vault, it was potentially a way station in a hidden landscape. This transforms the narrative from one of isolated survival to one of coordinated regional defense. Imagine a scenario where a threat emerged near one settlement. The entire population could descend, seal their doors, and then, if the danger persisted or moved, they could travel for miles in complete safety beneath the earth, emerging in another city entirely. This network suggests a level of planning and social cooperation that is almost unprecedented in the ancient world. It implies that multiple communities, possibly spanning different valleys and even different time periods, agreed on a common blueprint for survival. They standardized their architecture, their door mechanisms, and their ventilation systems to create a compatible, interconnected refuge. The logistical mind behind this is staggering. It required not just engineering skill, but diplomacy, shared resources, and a collective memory of past catastrophes so powerful that it compelled rivals or neighbors to work together. This was not a panicked, last-ditch effort. This was a centuries-long civil defense project, carved into the bedrock of an entire region. The discovery of the network expands the mystery exponentially. It forces us to ask what shared experience was so terrible, so universally understood across this land, that the only logical response was to literally rewrite the map, creating a second, hidden world beneath the first, where entire populations could live, move, and endure out of sight. The stone architecture is only half the story. The true, untold history of Derinkuyu is written not in its walls, but in the daily rhythms of the people who called it home. Think for a moment about the reality of that choice. A family, perhaps with young children or elderly grandparents, gathers their most essential belongings and walks down a staircase into the earth. Behind them, a massive stone door rumbles shut, sealing them in a world of perpetual twilight. The familiar sun and seasons vanish, replaced by the constant, cool damp of the rock and the faint, distant sigh of air moving through the shafts. This was not a weekend camping trip. It could last for months or even years. How do you maintain not just life, but a sense of humanity under such conditions? Social order would have been paramount. In the confined, echoing chambers, every sound carried, every conflict could ripple through the entire community. Historians suggest that strict, unwritten codes of conduct must have governed everything from noise levels and waste disposal to the fair allocation of food and living space. Leadership would have been essential, likely falling to respected elders or those with specific skills in medicine, engineering, or conflict resolution. Their authority was not about power but about collective survival. Enforcing these rules in a pressure cooker environment with no option to simply walk away would have been one of the greatest challenges of all. Maintaining morale was another silent battle. Imagine the psychological weight of knowing the world above might be ash or occupied by a hostile force. How did they combat despair and the creeping sense of confinement? They likely clung fiercely to the rituals of normal life. The communal kitchens became more than just places to prepare food. They were hubs of social interaction and warmth. Storytelling, music, and the teaching of children would have been vital acts of cultural preservation, a way to remind everyone of who they were and what they were waiting to return to. The very presence of wineries and olive presses speaks to this need for continuity, turning practical tasks into ceremonies that connected them to their past. The dimly lit chapels carved by later Christian inhabitants point to a deep need for spiritual solace and communal hope. Reflect on your own life for a moment. How would you cope if your entire world shrank to a series of carved rooms, shared with hundreds of others with no clear end in sight? Your patience, your generosity, your very identity would be tested in ways we can scarcely comprehend. This is the crucial human dimension often lost in the marvel of the engineering. The true masterpiece of Derinkuyu was not the city itself, but the fragile, resilient community that managed to keep its light burning in the deep, long dark. Deep within the cool, silent stone, a simple symbol speaks volumes. Among the functional rooms and storage chambers, explorers have uncovered spaces that served a different kind of need. Carved directly into the rock are small, humble chapels, their altars facing east. On the walls nearby, the unmistakable shape of a cross has been etched over and over by hands seeking comfort in the darkness. These are not the markings of the city's original Hittite or Phrygian builders. They are the fingerprints of a later group, early Christian communities, who turned this underground fortress into a sanctuary of faith during the brutal periods of Roman persecution. For them, Derinkuyu was more than a hiding place. It was a clandestine church, a place where their forbidden beliefs could be practiced in safety, far from the eyes of imperial authorities. This religious layer adds a profound human dimension to the stone. It shows us the city was not tied to one culture or one crisis. It was a reusable solution, a blank slate of security that different ideological groups, separated by centuries, could adapt for their own survival. The core function remained constant: protection, but the stories of those seeking it changed with the tides of history. The presence of these sacred spaces is perhaps the most telling clue of all about life underground. It underscores that survival is not merely a physical endeavor. In times of extreme duress, trapped in perpetual twilight, the human spirit craves meaning and hope as much as it needs air and water. Carving a cross into the wall was an act of defiance and an anchor to identity. It was a way to hold onto a sense of purpose, to gather as a community, not just to share rations, but to share in prayer and solidarity. This transforms our understanding of the city's design. The planners provided for the body with wells and granaries, and for the community with gathering halls. And in their own way, by leaving plain walls and quiet niches, they also provided the space for the soul. A chapel hewn from rock, lit by a single oil lamp, completes the picture of a truly holistic sanctuary. It tells us that to endure a long emergency, people need to nourish every part of what makes them human. The stone city offered a shell, but it was faith, ritual, and shared belief that often provided the fragile, essential light within it. 20,000 people is not just a number, it is a logistical symphony that had to be performed flawlessly in the dark. a city of that size, sealed away, would consume over 10 tons of food and thousands of gallons of water every single day. The physical space of Derinkuyu is impressive, but its true genius lies in the invisible systems of rationing, recycling, and distribution that kept this hidden society from collapsing under its own needs. This was a monumental exercise in survival economics, managed without written records or digital spreadsheets. The evidence is carved directly into the stone. Vast circular chambers served as grain silos, their smooth walls designed to store and protect thousands of bushels of wheat and barley from moisture and pests. Archaeologists estimate that filling just one of these silos would have required the surplus of an entire farming season. Nearby, the broad, low stables with tethering stones tell us livestock were not a temporary provision. Bringing animals underground was a strategic calculation. They provided a renewable source of food, milk, and wool, but they also consumed precious fodder and water. Their presence meant planners had to balance immediate nutritional needs against long-term sustainability. The communal kitchens, with their large, central hearths and networks of carved shelves, point to a highly organized approach to food preparation. Cooking individually for thousands of separate families would have been wildly inefficient, wasting fuel and creating chaos. Instead, food was likely prepared in bulk, with designated individuals managing the fires and distributing set portions. This centralized system allowed for strict control over rationing and minimized the risk of fire in the confined, oxygen-sensitive environment. Waste management was another critical puzzle. All those people and animals produced significant waste. The intricate drainage channels we see were not just for water, they were part of a sanitation network that directed refuse away from living quarters and fresh water wells, funneling it into deep, designated sump pits. This prevented the spread of illness, a constant threat in close quarters. Think of the social structures required to enforce this. Someone had to be in charge of the grain count, deciding how much to grind each week. Someone had to manage the rotation of animals from the pens to the butchery areas. Someone had to oversee the cleaning of the drainage channels and the fair distribution of water from the deep wells. This was not a free-for-all. It was a tightly regulated command economy born of absolute necessity. The administrators of Derinkuyu, whether elders, priests, or chosen leaders, were managing a closed system with zero margin for error. Their planning horizon wasn't days or weeks, it was seasons, possibly years. They had to calculate how many mouths could be fed by the stored grain, how many animals could be sustained to breed for the future, and how to allocate space and tasks to prevent social strife. This analytical dive transforms the city from an architectural wonder into a breathtaking case study in pre-industrial crisis logistics. The physical labor of carving the city is only half the story. The other half is the administrative genius, the forgotten social contract that held 20,000 people together in a shared, disciplined purpose, ensuring that their sanctuary did not become their tomb. The city's corridors twist and turn in a deliberate, disorienting maze. This was not an accidental result of expansion, but a calculated feature of its defense. The main passageways are rarely straight for more than a few dozen feet, often narrowing suddenly or descending in a tight spiral. For an invading force unfamiliar with the layout, this would have been a nightmare. They could not form a shield wall or charge en masse. Instead, they would be funneled into single file, their vision limited to the flickering torchlight on the curving stone just ahead. In these choke points, a handful of determined defenders, armed with simple spears or even just heavy rocks dropped from a hidden alcove above, could hold off a much larger group. The architecture itself became a weapon, multiplying the strength of those who knew its secrets. At key intersections and near vital areas like the water supply, archaeologists have identified rooms that stand apart from the domestic quarters. These chambers are often more centrally located, with thicker walls and multiple exit points. They lack the markings of a family dwelling or a storage space. Instead, their position suggests they served as tactical command centers, places where lookouts could be posted and from which defenders could be directed to different trouble points. The presence of these rooms transforms our understanding of the city's purpose. Derinkuyu was not merely a passive refuge, a place to wait out a storm. Its layout reveals a society prepared for the grim possibility of a siege from within the earth itself. They understood that their sanctuary might one day be breached, and they engineered every corridor and chamber to give themselves the ultimate home field advantage. This military precision woven into the stone tells us they were ready to fight for their buried world. It adds a fierce, strategic layer to the story, moving beyond simple hiding to a complex, active doctrine of layered defense. Yet this instinct to retreat into the earth is not unique to Cappadocia. From the sun-baked islands of Malta to the remote highlands of China, we find echoes of the same desperate ingenuity. Beneath the modern streets of Valletta, a labyrinth of hand-carved tunnels known as the Hypogeum descends through 3 levels of solid limestone. Built thousands of years ago by a mysterious prehistoric culture, it served as both a sacred burial complex and a place of shelter, its echoing halls designed with sophisticated acoustics that suggest ritual and refuge were intertwined. Far to the east, in the arid lowest plains of China, entire communities carved sprawling subterranean courtyards out of the soft soil. These yeyadong, or cave dwellings, are not just ancient history. Many are still inhabited today, offering natural insulation from scorching summers and freezing winters. While less defensive than Derinkuyu, they spring from the same fundamental understanding that the earth itself provides stability and protection. Even in the sandstone mesas of the American Southwest, ancestral pueblones constructed elaborate cliff dwellings and underground ceremonial rooms called kivas, using the landscape as a fortress against both the elements and conflict. What connects these distant sites is not a shared blueprint, but a shared human impulse. When faced with environmental hardship or external threat, cultures across time and geography have independently arrived at the same profound solution: go down. Derinkuyu stands out not because it is alone, but because it represents perhaps the most extreme and systematized expression of this universal idea. Its scale, its engineering, and its interconnectedness push the concept of underground refuge to its absolute limit. Seeing it within this global context deepens the mystery. It suggests that the drive to carve a sanctuary from stone is woven into our species' story, a recurring chapter written whenever the surface world becomes too perilous. This comparative view transforms Derinkuyu from an isolated wonder into a powerful testament. It shows us that the city is not merely a Turkish anomaly, but a particularly advanced note in a worldwide symphony of survival, composed again and again by human hands in the dark. The walls of Derinkuyu are covered in marks, but not a single one forms a written word. This is one of the most compelling paradoxes of the entire site. We have a metropolis of staggering complexity, a project that must have required generations of labor and immense social coordination. Yet there is no builder's inscription, no royal decree, and no chronicler's account that mentions its construction by name. For a historian, this silence is as loud as any shout. It forces us to ask why one of humanity's most ambitious architectural projects left almost no paper trail. The first and most likely reason is secrecy. If the city's primary purpose was to be invisible, to be a sanctuary unknown to potential invaders, then broadcasting its existence in any written form would have been the ultimate folly. Think of it as a state secret, but on a civilizational scale. The knowledge of its location, its entrances, and its capacity would have been guarded as closely as any treasure, passed down orally through trusted community leaders. Writing it down would have created a risk, a physical object that could be lost, stolen, or discovered by the wrong people. In this light, the absence of records is not an oversight, it is the clearest possible sign of success. The city was meant to be forgotten by the outside world, and for centuries it was. Another possibility is the simple accident of history. Written records from antiquity are incredibly fragile. They were kept on papyrus, parchment, or wax tablets, materials that decay rapidly unless preserved in very specific, dry conditions. A library holding the plans for Derinkuyu could have been burned in a raid, crumbled to dust in a damp cellar, or simply been discarded when the immediate crisis passed. The stone city endured, but the manual for its creation did not. There is also a more social dimension to consider. The immense labor of carving the city likely fell not to scribes or nobles, but to the hands of everyday farmers, artisans, and their families. These were people who worked with chisels, not quills. They may have belonged to a class for whom large-scale writing was uncommon, a practical community that built its legacy directly into the earth, believing the stone itself would be its own testament. Their story was told in the negative space they created, not on a scroll. This reflective silence challenges our modern assumption that great achievements must be documented to be real. It asks us to value the artifact over the archive. The empty space where the written record should be becomes its own kind of evidence, a shadow that tells us more than a faded page ever could. It speaks of a fear so profound or a purpose so vital that the builders chose obscurity over glory. They prioritized the survival of their community over the credit for their work. In the end, the greatest mystery of Derinkuyu may not be how it was built, but why its architects were so determined to ensure that no one, especially us, would ever know their names. The silence of the empty corridors is broken by the small, forgotten things left behind. Scattered across the dusty floors and resting on carved ledges, archaeologists have uncovered the humble artifacts of a frozen moment. These are not treasures of gold or jewels, but the practical, everyday objects of a community in hiding: simple pottery jars, worn grinding stones, bronze tools, and the fragile, soot-blackened remains of clay oil lamps. While grand monuments speak of power and ideology, these modest items whisper the story of ordinary people living through extraordinary times. Each one is a direct connection to a human hand, a personal possession that survived the centuries to tell us how life was actually lived in the deep dark. A single, intact oil lamp found on a bench in a deep chamber, for instance, transforms our understanding. It is not just an object, it is a statement against the oppressive blackness. Its small, flickering flame would have pushed back the shadows in a tiny circle, defining a space for a family to gather, to eat, to talk, or to simply find comfort in a point of light. This was how they personalized the darkness, carving out pockets of warmth and visibility in an otherwise boundless night. For researchers, these artifacts are more than emotional touchstones, they are precise scientific tools. The style of pottery, the design of a tool's handle, even the chemical residue left inside a storage jar, all serve as chronological fingerprints. By comparing these finds to objects from well-dated surface sites, archaeologists can piece together the timeline of Derinkuyu's occupation. A particular type of grinding stone might link a level to the Hittite era, while a style of lamp might signal use during the early Roman period. These objects allow scientists to map not just who was there, but when and what they were doing. A cluster of loom weights in one room suggests textile work was a common pastime, a vital way to repair clothing and stay productive. The discovery of gaming pieces carved from bone or stone hints at the need for distraction and leisure, even under immense pressure. Each artifact is a clue in a vast, three-dimensional puzzle, helping to reconstruct the daily rhythms that gave structure to an otherwise unstructured existence. This seventh clue, the artifacts of daily life, completes the human picture in a way the architecture alone cannot. The rolling stone doors tell us they were afraid. The ventilation shafts tell us they were clever, but a child's small toy or a woman's simple spindle whorl tells us they were people. They brought with them into the earth the mundane necessities and small comforts that define a culture. In these objects, we see the stubborn persistence of normalcy. The act of grinding grain into flour in the dim light was not just about making bread, it was about maintaining the familiar ritual of a meal. Mending a torn tunic was about preserving dignity and routine. These were conscious acts of defiance against chaos, a way to assert that life, in all its domestic detail, would go on. It reminds us that the history of catastrophe is not written solely in broad strokes of destruction and engineering, but in the quiet, resilient patterns of cooking, working, and simply trying to make a home, even when that home is buried 100 feet beneath a world that may have been falling apart. The soft, tough stone was a blessing, but it also posed a constant, silent threat. Carving a single room deep underground is one thing, but stacking 8 entire levels, one atop the other, with corridors, staircases, and wide communal halls, creates an immense engineering puzzle. The weight of the earth above is unimaginable. A single miscalculation in the carving, one pillar placed too far apart, and the entire city would have collapsed into a tomb of its own making. The builders of Derinkuyu solved this with a combination of profound intuitive physics and backbreaking labor. They did not simply dig out space, they sculpted it with an architect's eye for pressure and support. Throughout the city, you will find thick, robust pillars of living rock left strategically in place. These were not afterthoughts, they were integral parts of the original design, left standing as the material around them was painstakingly chipped away. The builders understood load distribution. They knew that a wide, open hall needed a central support, so they left a pillar in the middle. They knew that long corridors needed reinforcement at regular intervals, so they left sections of wall jutting out as buttresses. This was a subtractive architecture where stability was defined by what you chose not to remove. The ceilings themselves are often gently arched or domed, a shape far stronger than a flat slab, naturally directing the immense weight of the overlying rock down into the walls and pillars. Think of it like carving a sculpture from a block of ice. A master artist doesn't just hack away randomly, they work with the material's inherent structure, knowing which parts must remain to hold the whole piece together. The builders of Derinkuyu were those master artists, but their medium was an entire mountain, and their masterpiece was a city designed to last millennia. This knowledge was not written in a manual. It was a craft passed from one generation of stoneworkers to the next, a tactile understanding of the rock's grain and strength, learned through a lifetime of listening to the sound of a chisel, feeling the vibration in the stone, and recognizing the subtle warning signs of stress. Every smooth wall, every perfectly rounded arch, represents thousands of hours of skilled, mindful labor. They worked with simple bronze and iron tools by the flickering light of oil lamps, measuring not with lasers but with practiced eyes and outstretched arms. The precision is humbling. Staircases spiral downward at consistent, manageable angles. Doorways are aligned. Ventilation shafts pierce straight through multiple levels without deviation. This consistency across such a vast project tells us they were working from a shared, deeply ingrained tradition. They were not amateurs digging a hole, they were professionals executing a complex, understood blueprint for subterranean living. This engineering legacy is often overshadowed by the drama of the city's purpose, but it is just as worthy of our awe. Derinkuyu stands today not as a ruin, but as a fully intact, inhabited space, because the people who built it knew exactly what they were doing. They transformed the mountain from a passive shelter into an active, engineered environment. In doing so, they left behind a monument not to kings or gods, but to the durable power of human ingenuity and collective skill, a testament written not on parchment, but in the enduring silence of perfectly balanced stone. But every sanctuary, no matter how perfectly engineered, has an end. The final, silent clue written into the stone of Derinkuyu is not one of construction, but of departure. The city was not destroyed, it was simply left. In many of its chambers, archaeologists have found a scene of peaceful suspension. Tools rest where they were last set down. Storage jars stand empty but unbroken. A layer of fine, uniform silt coats the floors, undisturbed for centuries, telling a story of slow, patient accumulation in perfect stillness. This is the evidence of a deliberate exit, not a panicked flight. The rolling stone doors were not sealed in a final, desperate act. They were left open, allowing the outside world to slowly seep back in. So why would a community walk away from such a monumental investment, from a fortress that had protected their ancestors for generations? The answer likely lies not in a new disaster, but in a change in the world above. One compelling theory points to shifting political landscapes. For the early Christian communities who were among the last major inhabitants, the era of brutal Roman persecution eventually gave way to the Edict of Milan in the 4th century, which granted religious tolerance across the empire. When your faith is no longer a crime, the need for a secret underground church evaporates. The surface, with its sunlight and open air, becomes safe again. The city's purpose had been fulfilled. Another possibility is that the very memory of the original catastrophe faded. If Derinkuyu's first layers were carved to survive volcanic winters or Bronze Age invasions, those specific threats might have receded into legend over the centuries. Maintaining the vast complex required constant effort, clearing ventilation shafts, reinforcing walls, and managing resources. Without the immediate, tangible fear that had justified such labor for so long, the will to maintain this underground world may have simply dwindled. Each generation would have found the surface life more appealing, and the knowledge of the deep city's full operation may have slowly been lost, becoming the stuff of bedtime stories rather than survival manuals. The abandonment, therefore, is not a failure. It is a quiet victory. It marks the moment when the people of this region finally felt secure enough to turn their backs on their greatest masterpiece of defense. They chose the risk and vibrancy of the surface world over the perfect safety of the stone womb. This transition is profoundly human. We build fortresses to survive storms, but we are not meant to live in them forever. The layers of dust in Derinkuyu are not a sign of defeat, but a testament to resilience. They tell us that the community it sheltered endured, adapted, and ultimately moved on, leaving the empty city below as a silent monument to a fear they had finally outgrown. What does it say about us that our greatest shelters are most successful when they are no longer needed? The modern story of Derinkuyu is still being written, not with chisels but with lasers. Since that chance discovery in 1963, archaeologists have faced a monumental task: how to study a city made of soft stone without harming the very fabric they seek to understand. Traditional excavation is often too invasive, risking damage to fragile walls and artifacts preserved in the dry, cool air for millennia. Today, the tools of discovery are digital. Teams use advanced laser scanning or LiDAR to map every corridor, every stairwell, and every air shaft with millimeter precision. This process creates a breathtakingly detailed three-dimensional model, a virtual twin of the entire underground complex. With this digital map, researchers can take measurements, analyze structural stress points, and even simulate airflow patterns, all without ever touching the ancient walls. It allows them to see connections and architectural patterns that are invisible to the naked eye, slowly decoding the logic of the ancient engineers from the comfort of a computer screen. This technological bridge lets us walk virtually through spaces too delicate for human traffic, offering a new kind of access to a world that was designed to be inaccessible. Each scan is like turning on a light in a room that has been dark for centuries, revealing not just the shape of the space, but the intelligent mind that formed it. We are, in a very real sense, having a conversation with the builders across time, using their stone language and our digital one to finally understand the full scale of their ambition. Yet this very act of rediscovery brings its own profound challenges. The soft tuff that made Derinkuyu possible is also its greatest vulnerability. The breath of thousands of visitors, the humidity from their skin, and the subtle vibrations of foot traffic can accelerate erosion, slowly wearing down carvings that have survived for thousands of years. Preservationists now walk a tightrope, balancing public access with absolute necessity of conservation. Carefully controlled pathways, advanced climate monitoring systems, and strict limits on visitor numbers are all part of a global effort to ensure this time capsule endures for future generations. The work is never finished. Each season, new scans might reveal a previously unknown chamber sealed behind a wall, or a subtle tool mark that tells us more about the construction sequence. This positions us, the modern audience, as active participants in an ongoing mystery. Every technological advance, from ground-penetrating radar to sophisticated moisture sensors, offers a fresh lens through which to view the past. We are not just learning about an ancient city, we are collaborating with it, using our latest tools to ask new questions of the old stone. What undiscovered room might the next laser scan reveal? What forgotten passage could be hiding behind what looks like a solid wall? The story of Derinkuyu is no longer confined to the past. It is a living dialogue between the ancient world's most durable creation and the modern world's most delicate probes, a partnership dedicated to ensuring that the whispers from the deep are never lost again. The true legacy of Derinkuyu is not measured in feet of depth, but in the depth of its meaning. This stone city ultimately transcends its own history, becoming something far greater than an ancient ruin. It stands as a universal monument to the human spirit's most fundamental instinct, the drive to preserve what matters when everything else is threatened. Beyond the engineering, beyond the specific wars or eruptions, its deepest purpose was to safeguard the intangible, the culture, the community, and the very continuity of life itself. In its dark halls, people protected not just their bodies, but their stories, their rituals, their relationships, and their hope. They carved out space for worship, for shared meals, for the routines of craft and family, insisting that these were worth saving even if the sun was not. This transforms Derinkuyu from an archaeological site into a powerful symbol. It is a physical manifestation of our collective will to endure, a testament written in rock that says, we will find a way to carry the flame forward, even if we must carry it into the dark. In this light, the city speaks directly to our modern moment. We may not carve cities from tuff today, but we are constantly building our own versions of Derinkuyu, designing refuges for different kinds of catastrophes. Our global efforts to create digital archives, to establish seed banks, to develop vaccines, or to build sustainable communities, these are all expressions of that same ancient impulse. They are our rolling stone doors and our deep storage chambers, crafted for new existential winters. This invites a quiet, personal reflection. What are the overwhelming forces we sense on our own horizon? And more importantly, what do we, as a society or as individuals, consider so precious, so vital to our identity and our future, that we would work tirelessly to seal it away for safekeeping? Is it knowledge, biodiversity, a set of ethical principles, or the simple bonds of community care? Derinkuyu does not give us the answers, but it frames the essential question with the weight of millennia. It reminds us that preparing for the worst is not an act of fear, but an act of profound love for what might come after. The city's greatest lesson may be that resilience is not merely about survival, it is about the careful, deliberate choice of what we choose to survive for. Deep beneath the surface, the air holds a constant, gentle coolness. This stable temperature, hovering around 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, was not a lucky accident, but a calculated feature of life in Derinkuyu. While the plains above baked in summer heat or shivered under winter frost, the city's interior remained in a perpetual, mild spring. This natural climate control was a survival tool as vital as any well or granary. The thick blanket of tough rock overhead acted as a phenomenal insulator, slowing the transfer of heat and cold from the surface world to a crawl. The earth itself became a thermal battery, damping the extremes and creating a remarkably stable microclimate. For the inhabitants, this meant more than simple comfort. It was a matter of food security and public health. Storing grain for months or years is a delicate science. If a storage chamber becomes too warm and damp, the entire harvest can be ruined by mold or insects. If it becomes too cold, vital seeds lose their viability. The consistent, cool, and dry environment of the underground chambers provided near-perfect natural preservation conditions. The massive clay jars of grain, oil, and legumes were not just hidden, they were kept in an ideal, climate-controlled warehouse. This passive system also protected the people themselves from the harsh realities of surface weather. In an era without modern medicine, surviving a blistering heat wave or a deep freeze was a serious challenge, especially for the very young and the elderly. The city's climate offered a refuge from these environmental stresses, reducing the risk of illness related to exposure and creating a baseline of physical stability for the entire community. This clue reveals a layer of understanding that goes beyond simple excavation. The builders were not just carving rooms, they were harnessing the inherent physics of the earth. They recognized that by going deep, they were tapping into the planet's own thermal mass, creating a self-regulating ecosystem. The tuff was more than a building block, it was an active participant in the design, a functional membrane that filtered out the dangerous volatility of the surface world. This represents a profound harmony with the environment. They didn't fight the mountain, they listened to it and used its natural properties to solve a complex set of problems with elegant efficiency. In a very real sense, the city breathed and maintained its temperature like a living thing, all through the intelligent application of ancient, observed science. It makes you wonder what other natural principles, understood through generations of quiet observation, were woven into the stone to create a sanctuary that didn't just exist within the earth, but truly lived with it. The genuine marvel of Derinkuyu can sometimes become obscured by layers of modern speculation. In popular retellings, the sheer scale of the city has led some to propose origins far beyond ancient human hands, suggesting everything from visits by otherworldly beings to the work of a forgotten, hyper-advanced civilization. While these stories capture the imagination, they inadvertently steal credit from the real people whose ingenuity is written in the stone. Archaeologists have a clear, evidence-based response to such claims. Every tool mark, every pottery fragment, and every architectural detail aligns perfectly with the known technologies and cultural practices of the Hittites, Phrygians, and early Christians. There are no mysterious alloys, no inexplicable energy sources, just the consistent, logical application of Bronze Age and Iron Age knowledge pushed to its absolute limit by necessity. The city is not an anomaly that defies history, it is a masterpiece that defines the peak of what ancient societies could achieve. This distinction matters because it shifts our wonder to the right place. To attribute Derinkuyu to aliens is to dismiss the breathtaking capabilities of our own ancestors. It suggests that humans facing a crisis could not possibly have conceived of such a solution, when the evidence proves they not only conceived it, but executed it across generations. The real story is one of communal intelligence, of observational science applied through trial and error over centuries. They learned how to shape their soft stone, how to manage airflow, how to distribute weight. This was not magic, it was meticulous, hard-won craft. Another common myth suggests the city was built in a single, frantic period by a large, organized workforce under a central command. The archaeological record, however, tells a story of organic, episodic growth. Different levels show different carving techniques, different room layouts, and different types of artifacts. This points to a city that expanded slowly, adapted by different cultures for different reasons, a living project rather than a finished product. Embracing this evidence-based view does not make the city any less magical. In fact, it makes it more profound. It means that ordinary people with families and fears not so different from our own were capable of extraordinary long-term planning. They collaborated not under the whip of a tyrant or the guidance of a star traveler, but under the shared, urgent understanding that their survival depended on it. This grounded perspective invites a more meaningful form of curiosity. Instead of asking who else could have built it, we can ask the far more compelling questions. How did they maintain their social bonds in the dark? What conversations happened around a single lamp deep on the 7th level? How did they teach their children the layout of the tunnels? These are human questions with human answers waiting in the archaeology, and they connect us directly to the past in a way that tales of lost superscience never can. The truth of Derinkuyu is not diminished by facts, it is illuminated by them. The city stands as a testament not to the mysterious and unreachable, but to the resilient and profoundly ingenious spirit that has always been a part of us. The same soft stone that preserved a civilization now faces a new and subtle threat, the warmth of our own breath. Today, Derinkuyu is a global destination, its ancient passageways now echoing with the footsteps of hundreds of thousands of visitors each year. This surge of attention creates a profound modern paradox. The revenue from tourism is essential, funding the teams of archaeologists, engineers, and conservators who work to stabilize the walls, monitor the air quality, and ensure the city's structural integrity. It transforms the site from a local secret into a shared world heritage, raising a global consciousness about our collective past. Yet, this very act of sharing risks altering the very thing we have come to see. Each visitor introduces minute changes to the environment, body heat, humidity, and the carbon dioxide from our breath. In a sealed, underground ecosystem that survived for millennia on a delicate balance, these human inputs accumulate. They can slowly raise the ambient temperature and moisture levels, creating conditions where microbial growth or salt crystallization can begin to erode the ancient carvings from within the stone itself. The soft tuff, so perfect for carving, is uniquely vulnerable to this kind of slow, invisible wear. It is a classic ethical dilemma of preservation, where the love for a place can become the very force that degrades it. This forces us to confront a difficult question about our own relationship with history. Is our primary role that of an observer or a guardian? When we descend those ancient staircases, are we entering a museum or a fragile, living artifact that our presence directly impacts? The managers of Derinkuyu now walk a tightrope, implementing careful solutions like timed ticketing to limit daily numbers, creating designated pathways to concentrate foot traffic, and using advanced sensors to monitor real-time changes in the underground climate. These measures are not about denying access, but about ensuring responsible access so that the city can whisper its stories to generations yet to come. It reframes the experience of visiting. We are no longer passive tourists, but temporary participants in an ongoing story of endurance. Our responsibility is to tread lightly, to listen more than we speak, and to remember that we are guests in a home built for survival, a home that has already weathered so much and now must find a way to survive our admiration. A city sealed away from the sun still needed the warmth of life. Among the most telling clues in Derinkuyu are the broad, low-ceilinged halls on the lower levels, their floors still marked by smooth, circular grooves and tethering stones set directly into the rock. These were not storage rooms or living quarters for people. They were protected stables designed to house the community's most vital companions, their livestock. This decision to bring animals underground was a stroke of strategic genius that transformed the city from a stark shelter into a living, breathing ecosystem. It was about far more than just having a walking food supply. The animals represented a complete recreation of the agricultural world above, brought into the heart of the stone. Sheep and goats would have provided a renewable source of milk, wool, and eventually meat, but their value went even deeper. In the constant, cool air of the underground, the collective body heat of these animals would have helped take the chill off the lower chambers, a natural, living furnace. Their waste, carefully collected, could have been dried and used as a crucial fuel source for cooking fires in the specially ventilated kitchens, or perhaps even as fertilizer for any small, lichen-like gardens they might have attempted in shafts where a little surface light filtered down. This integration reveals a breathtakingly holistic vision. The planners of Derinkuyu were not just stacking resources, they were weaving them into a closed loop. The animals ate fodder brought down and stored, they provided warmth and products for the people, and their waste returned to the cycle as fuel. This mimics the very circle of life that sustained their villages on the surface, miniaturized and adapted for the depths. It shows an understanding of ecological interdependence that feels remarkably modern. They knew that long-term survival was not just a matter of stockpiling enough jars of grain. True viability meant sustaining the processes of life itself. The gentle sounds of animals in the dark, the familiar smells of the barn, these things provided something intangible yet vital, a profound psychological tether to normalcy. For a community of farmers, the presence of their herds was a piece of home, a living reminder of the world they hoped to return to. This clue ultimately tells us they were not preparing for a brief siege, but for a generational event. They were building a world that could sustain itself, where every element, from the human residents to the smallest kid goat, played a role in a delicate, engineered balance. It was a stone ark designed not just to carry people through a flood of ash or conflict, but to preserve the very rhythm of their way of life, ensuring that if and when they rolled the stone door open again, they would emerge not as refugees, but as a community still intact, still capable of rebuilding everything they had left behind. The silent stone of Derinkuyu has found a powerful second life in the stories we tell ourselves. This ancient refuge has transcended archaeology to become a modern archetype, its form and function echoing through countless novels, films, and digital worlds as the ultimate bunker, the hidden sanctuary, or the lost civilization waiting to be rediscovered. When a science fiction author needs a setting for a society that survived a global cataclysm, or a game designer envisions a labyrinthine fortress buried to withstand an alien invasion, the blueprint they often reach for is, consciously or not, the one carved into the Cappadocian rock. Derinkuyu provides a template of believable ingenuity, a pre-technological proof of concept that makes our most fantastical survival scenarios feel hauntingly plausible. It is no longer just a historical site, it is a cultural touchstone for our deepest collective anxieties. The city's image taps directly into a universal nerve, the primal fear of a world becoming suddenly uninhabitable, and the corresponding fantasy of a prepared, secret space where our community and our way of life can be preserved intact. This resonance is why you will find its spiritual descendants in post-apocalyptic blockbusters, in dystopian young adult series, and in open-world video games where players scavenge through the ruins of a fallen surface to uncover hidden, thriving underworlds. Each of these creative works asks the same fundamental question Derinkuyu's builders answered with stone. What would you save and where would you hide it if the sky itself turned against you? The city's translation into popular culture does more than entertain. It actively bridges millennia. It proves that the core themes it embodies are not locked in the past. The human preoccupation with safety against overwhelming odds, the fierce need to protect community, and the compelling drama of a great secret hidden in plain sight, these are timeless. They are the raw materials of drama, and Derinkuyu offers a historically validated, physically real stage upon which that drama can play out. When we watch a hero discover a hidden hatch leading to a forgotten complex, or read about a council governing a subterranean city, we are participating in a narrative tradition that is thousands of years old. The modern imagination has not invented these scenarios, it has simply updated the technology and scaled the threat. The underlying emotional architecture, the blueprint of fear and hope, remains exactly the same. This creative legacy demonstrates that ancient history is not a static record, but a living wellspring. Derinkuyu continues to fuel our creativity because it represents a solved puzzle from our own past, a concrete example of human resilience that somehow comforts us even as we envision new fictional catastrophes. It assures us that the impulse to persevere, to plan, and to build a shelter for the future is an indelible part of who we are. The city's greatest export may not be a historical lesson, but a story seed, one that continues to grow in the fertile soil of our own modern uncertainties, reminding us that the most compelling tales of survival are often those that have already, in some form, been true. The map of Derinkuyu we have today is likely incomplete. For all our scanning and study, fundamental questions about this underground world remain stubbornly unanswered, their secrets still held by the silent stone. The first and perhaps largest mystery is the true scale of the network. We know of the tunnel stretching toward Kamakli, but where else might it lead? Could there be forgotten branches connecting to other, still undiscovered complexes, creating a subterranean web across the entire Cappadocian plateau? Ground-penetrating radar hints at voids and channels in areas between known sites, suggesting the landscape below might be far more hollow than we ever suspected. Each of these shadows on a scanner could be a new chapter waiting to be read. Then there is the question of depth. The 8th level is as far as modern excavations have safely reached, but early accounts and local legends speak of passages descending even deeper, perhaps to a mythical 12th or even 18th floor. These lower levels, if they exist, could hold the oldest sections of the city, the original Hittite excavations that started it all. They might also contain the most definitive clues about the city's ultimate purpose, sealed away for millennia in the deepest dark. But perhaps the most elusive answer is the trigger. While we can list the plausible threats from volcanic eruption to invading armies, we lack a single, definitive piece of evidence, a layer of ash or an artifact hoard that pins the city's peak occupation to one specific catastrophic event. Was it a single, generation-defining disaster that forced the final, great expansion, or was it the slow, cumulative pressure of all these fears? The stone does not say. These open questions are not a failure of archaeology, but its very engine. They are what transformed Derinkuyu from a solved puzzle into a living conversation with the past. Every unanswered question is an invitation, a space for future explorers armed with new technologies we cannot yet envision. The next generation might use molecular analysis to read the climate history trapped in the walls, or artificial intelligence to model social patterns from the layout of rooms. A future excavation conducted with tools of exquisite delicacy might finally clear a blocked shaft and reveal a lower level untouched since the day it was sealed. This forward-looking perspective changes how we see the city. Derinkuyu is not a relic whose story is finished. It is a dialogue, one where we have only just begun to listen. The massive stone doors may be permanently open now, but in a scholarly sense, the city is merely paused, patiently waiting in the cool dark for the next curious mind, the next beam of light, to uncover the clue that rewrites everything we think we know. Our journey here ends not with a period, but with a question mark, an acknowledgement that the most profound histories are those that continue to unfold, reminding us that curiosity is the one tool that never wears out. Derinkuyu stands as a monumental testament to human foresight, cooperation, and the unwavering will to survive. From its geological origins to its sophisticated engineering, every stone tells a story of a community preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. This underground city challenges us to look beyond surface-level history and consider the depths of human ingenuity in times of crisis. As we face our own modern uncertainties, the silent halls of Derinkuyu offer a powerful reminder that resilience is often built not in monuments that reach for the sky, but in sanctuaries carved with purpose deep within the earth. The city's legacy is not one of fear, but of profound care, a collective decision to safeguard the fragile flame of community against whatever winds might blow above. It asks us to reflect on what we, in our own time, consider worth preserving, and what lengths we would go to in order to protect it. The story of Derinkuyu is ultimately a story of hope written in stone, a proof that even in the face of overwhelming forces, the human spirit finds a way to endure, to plan, and to build a future, no matter how deep it must go to lay the foundation. If this journey into the depths has captivated you, delve deeper by subscribing for more explorations of history's greatest mysteries, and share your thoughts on what other secrets might be hidden below in the comments.